A northern pipeline improving the rail line connecting to Hudson's Bay to the Prairies, expedited critical mineral mining, all on the table with the new One Canadian Economy Act and Ontario's Bill 5. Great for Canada, but perhaps with US tariffs on the horizon. But how does all of this affect First Nation rights? Our Truth in Politics panel will dig into this. Jennifer Laewetz is back. She is a CEO with Paskwâw Strategies, and Winnipeg Free Press columnist Niigaan Sinclair is here too. Welcome back, Jennifer and Niigaan. Jennifer, let's start with you. Bill C-5 got royal assent on June 26th, very quickly, we might add. But the federal government did not meet with their First Nation leaders until last week in Gatineau, Quebec, when the bill is already a done deal. What do you make of that?
I think we're seeing a government now that just wants to move ahead with resource development and, investment into this country and our economy. I think it's rather unfortunate that it happened as quickly as it did. I think, First Nations were not given the proper opportunity to understand fully what this bill meant and also what their position was going to be on it. Seeing all of our people, flock to Ottawa after the bill has already received royal assent just seems very redundant and it's already passed. So at this point, our opportunity to meet a committee, to meet with ministers, make those amendments that are necessary, but also for us at our end as well to come together and decide what position we're actually going to take on this. It seemed rushed. It seemed like there wasn't much consultation. Actually, I feel comfortable saying there wasn't any consultation. And this is just a prime example of how, government needs to be coming to the table. We are in a nation-to-nation relationship, and unfortunately that did not happen.
Niigaan, the meeting between the Prime Minister and chiefs was closed to the media. Only a few select stakeholders were allowed in. But APTN National News obtained an hour and 18-minute audio recording of it all. You've heard the recording, Niigaan. What do you make of that, what was said in that meeting?
Well, it's certainly evident that during closed-door meetings, I guess we shouldn't be surprised that there are certain things that are said or promises that are made. And one of the most interesting promises out of that recording was that the Prime Minister said to chiefs that if the provinces won't come on board, he will bring them on board. What he said is bring them up. That is certainly a messaging that the Premier's meeting later might have been more interested to hear from, because it certainly creates a sort of situation in which the premiers will have to face a prime minister who is going to be moving very quickly, as Jen pointed out. And if the provinces want to drag their feet, or if they want to, in the case of Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew, consider Indigenous rights, they're going to be facing off against a federal agenda that's going to want to move very quickly. And so I think there's a communication difference that we will need to keep an eye on in the future.
Pipelines, logging projects, railroads, interprovincial trade, critical minerals, the Ring of Fire, all of that fast track with the Prime Minister and the premiers telling the original people of the continent, don't worry, we can still talk. But it would seem there was no mention of being equal partners with big government and big business. Your takeaway on that, Jennifer?
I think that's one of the biggest, concerns about all of this is that it's really black and white when it comes to whether or not First Nations or, Indigenous people in general support research development in this country. It's already a contentious issue that most people have a hard time dissecting on what stand to take on it. But at the end of the day, if there are going to be these projects and we are going to be involved in them, we cannot be coming to the table and just looking for scraps. It's not, okay, everyone make these business deals, everybody make the plans for these investments, and then at the end, we look at the Indigenous people and decide whether or not they want to be part of it, but then we're begging for the bottom of the barrel. If you were going to be putting projects in any type of industry through our traditional territories across this country, we need to be equal partners, and not just equal partners in terms of investment and what those business opportunities look like, but equal partners in terms of the environmental impacts and whether or not we're brought to the table to have those discussions about what impacts it could have on our lands, and who knows our lands better than our own people. And it's why I keep saying that nations need to get to the table and start, building out their due to consult protocols, mapping out their traditional territories, and, having those discussions about free, prior, and informed consent.
Back to you, Niigaan. What do you think of the rhetoric Carney and the premiers are using? Words like providing services, Ontario Premier Ford telling chiefs to take the money. Premiers say we are here to listen. Nothing in terms of treaty rights or original jurisdiction or title in the context of international law.
all very transactional. I think there's a historical misunderstanding around treaty as being these kinds of transactional relationships. You give one thing, I give another. Not about living together, co-governing, sharing the land, sharing resources, and working together towards the better good for all people. And I think that that's a general misunderstanding of treaty that unfortunately is embodied by the leaders who are most often voted in by people who may not always understand treaty either. It's a kind of a national education problem, an epidemic of misunderstanding, as it were. What we've got really here is we've got premiers who want to move quickly, who see a lot of economic benefit and opportunity, and they're not that interested in talking about spirit and intent. They're not that interested in talking about sharing. They're not that interested in talking about what it really means to be able to evoke and fulfill those agreements that are the legal foundation of the country or the Constitution. I mean, the Constitution is supposed to be about people working together from the very beginning of these laws, not at the very tail end of how much do we pay you. It's supposed to be about working together from the very outset for the betterment of all. And one of the side benefits to all of this, of course, is that when we do fulfill the treaties, we will save the land. We will give air, we will have fresh food to eat, clean water to drink. And I think Canadians need to understand that.
The Yellowhead Institute says this whole fast tracking of natural resource exploitation will put First Nations against each other. For example, some support the liquid natural gas pipeline over the Rocky Mountains to the West Coast, while others along the way are harshly opposed. What are your thoughts about this, Jennifer?
Well, I think it's really tricky when we get into the conversation about First Nations supporting anything, especially because it goes back to the conversation of who is it that is supporting it. Is it the inherent right holders that belong to that nation, or is it just the chief that might be belonging to his leadership role and then he's making those decisions on behalf of his nation? It's always a very, very difficult conversation to have about who supports what, because, you know, it always goes back to the elders and the youth, because we think about the people that have been the stewards of those resources and the caring for the community and the people, and then the youth that we need to look out for the future generations. So I think, you know, when we talk about who supports what, there is absolutely going to be a divide. And I think the country does see the fact that we are divided right now. And not only are we divided, we are dealing with some pretty heavy issues at a grassroots level. You know, we're seeing some of our overhead organizations, so to speak, that, you know, maybe haven't been running as effectively as they should be, from the AFN to the FSIN. You know, the FSIN hasn't even taken a public position on this that I've seen online. So I think that the government sees that and says, you know, they're trying to figure their stuff out right now. They're kind of a mess. We just need to forge ahead and they can figure it out later. And that's a really sad reality to come to.
And Niigaan, what about this ring of fire? Lots of critical minerals up there in Northern Ontario, cobalt, lithium, but no regard by the mining companies for the original peoples who arguably still own the territory. Some of the First Nations are going to court to try and stop development. Protest camps are springing up. Chiefs are threatening of another Idle No More. What's going to happen? Are we going to be crushed, or are we going to get a fair cut?
Just to add what Jennifer said just a minute ago, I also think the conflict may be coming along gendered lines. There's a sort of a key area to speak about when many chiefs are men and put into these situations of power, placed in positions of power. Actually, many of the people who led Idle No More was not chiefs. It was women. It was young people. And I think that these are really important issues to realize, that when we have opportunities presented to us as First Nations peoples, we have to work together. We have to be able to work collectively, and we have to find some compromise amongst ourselves, which is why time is important, why speeding up is completely antithetical. And what you get is you get a long historical kind of deficit mentality in which chiefs are there to try to provide for the people. So oftentimes coming with a good intention to maybe provide jobs or money or you know, a new youth center or a new arena, for example. But you cannot do that at the cost of the environment, at the cost of our culture, tradition, at the cost of our relationships within the very frameworks of our families and our nation. And when you have an external force that says, no, we need to get this done by Tuesday, there's not a lot of consideration for what is our culture and tradition, and therefore those things often get kind of tossed aside towards the great mighty dollar. And that's what you're seeing right now. What I said many years ago was, when the federal Liberals came in, when we were marching on the streets against Stephen Harper, in those days I was an activist and organizer, and suddenly now we had a Liberal government. I said that you're going to see the most most amount of division ever in First Nations history. And that's taken a long time to kind of people who are both with the government, against the government. And when it comes to speed, this is now becoming to a head. So I don't think you're going to see kind of similar that I don't know more looked like, but what you're going to see is you're going to see a very distinct difference, and Bill C-5 seems to be that kind of hinge point or that wedge issue that will bring into many communities. And I think that will leave some communities doing very well and some communities who will be left behind, and that will ultimately be a problem for everybody because it will create more acrimony.
Jennifer and Niigaan, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you both for your time.
Miigwech, thanks.